I thought he was the maintenance guy when I opened the door in nothing but a towel, and the way his eyes widened when he saw me made me realize that whoever he was, he definitely wasn't expecting to find me dripping wet and half-naked in apartment 12B. I'd been living in the luxury high-rise in downtown Miami for exactly 3 days when my shower started making this awful grinding noise, and when I called the front desk, they said they'd send someone up to take a look. So when I heard the knock at 2 p.m., I grabbed the first towel I could find, wrapped it around myself, and rushed to the door without thinking twice about my state of undress. The man standing in my doorway was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair and the kind of intense brown eyes that seemed to see everything. He was wearing work clothes, navy coveralls with a logo I couldn't quite read, but something about the way he carried himself suggested he was used to being in charge of things, not fixing them. Before I continue this, hit that subscribe button. I post one real story every single day. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I'm always curious who my stories are reaching. You called about a plumbing issue, he said, his voice deeper than I'd expected, with just the hint of an accent that sounded maybe Cuban or Colombian. Yes, the shower. It's making this terrible noise. I clutched my towel tighter, suddenly very aware that I was standing there practically naked in front of a complete stranger. I can put some clothes on if you need me to show you. That's probably a good idea, he said, but he didn't look away. Instead, his eyes traveled over my face, my bare shoulders, the water still beating on my skin, like he was memorizing every detail. I'll just be a minute, I said, backing toward my bedroom. The bathroom is down the hall, second door on the right. Take your time. I hurried to my bedroom and threw on the first clothes I could find, yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, trying to ignore the way my heart was racing. There had been something about the intensity in his eyes, something that made me feel like he'd been looking at me as a woman, not just an inconvenient tenant in a towel. When I emerged from my bedroom, I found him standing in my kitchen, not in the bathroom like I'd expected. Did you find the problem? I asked. I'm not actually here about your shower, he said, turning to face me with an expression I couldn't read. What do you mean? I mean, I'm not a maintenance worker. My heart started beating faster, and not in a good way. Then who are you? I'm Daniel Ruiz. I own this building. I stared at him, trying to process what he was telling me. You own the building? I own the building. And I came up here because I wanted to meet the person who's been playing piano at 3 in the morning for the past 3 nights. That's you. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I'm so sorry. I had no idea anyone could hear. I've been having trouble sleeping and music helps me relax, but I can stop if it's bothering. It's not bothering me. The way he said it, quiet and certain, made me look at him more carefully. Then why are you here? Daniel was quiet for a moment, and I watched him seem to wrestle with how much truth he was willing to share. Because I've been standing on my balcony every night for 3 nights, listening to you play, and I realized I needed to know who was making that kind of music. What kind of music? The kind that sounds like someone understands exactly how lonely 3 a.m. feels. The words hit me like a physical blow, partly because they were so unexpectedly intimate, and partly because they were completely accurate. I didn't know anyone was listening. I live in the penthouse. Sound travels. And you came down here to tell me to stop? I came down here to ask you not to stop. We looked at each other across my small kitchen, and I felt something electric pass between us. This man, this stranger who owned my building and had been listening to me play piano in the middle of the night, was looking at me like I was something precious he'd been searching for. Daniel, I said carefully, why were you dressed like a maintenance worker? Because I wanted to see who you were, but I didn't want you to know who I was. Why not? Because I'm 43 years old and you're clearly much younger, and I'm your landlord, and showing up at your door to tell you that your music has been keeping me awake in the best possible way seemed like a terrible idea. How old do you think I am? 25? 26. 25. Exactly my point. I studied his face, trying to understand what was happening between us. Daniel, can I ask you something? Anything. When you opened that door and saw me in a towel, what were you thinking? His cheeks flushed slightly. I was thinking that I'd made a very serious mistake in judgment. What kind of mistake? The kind where you convince yourself you just want to satisfy your curiosity about someone, and then you see them and realize curiosity isn't what you're feeling at all. My breath caught. What were you feeling? Like I'd been struck by lightning. The honesty in his voice made my knees weak. Daniel, I know this is inappropriate. I know I should apologize and leave and pretend this never happened. He stepped closer, and I could smell his cologne, something clean and expensive that made me want to step closer instead of backing away. But I also know that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since I first heard you play, and seeing you today just made everything worse. Worse how? Worse because now I know you're not just a mysterious musician. You're beautiful and real and standing in front of me, and I can't pretend I don't want to know everything about you. What would you do if you were in my place? Tell me in the comments. I stared at this man who had just turned my ordinary Tuesday afternoon into something that felt like the beginning of a movie, and I realized that everything I thought I knew about my life was about to change. This is crazy, I said. Completely crazy. You're my landlord. Technically, the building management company is your landlord. I just own the property. That's not better, Daniel. That's worse. I know. And you lied to me about who you were. I did. And you've been listening to me play piano without my knowledge for 3 days. All true. I looked at him, at the way he was standing there accepting my accusations without trying to defend himself or minimize what he'd done. Are you going to apologize? I asked. For lying? Yes. For listening to you play? No. Why not? Because your music saved me from 3 of the worst nights I've had in months, and I'm not sorry I got to hear it. What was so bad about your nights? Daniel's expression grew complicated, and I saw him decide whether to let me in or keep me at a distance. I've been going through a divorce, he said finally. A very long, very ugly divorce that finally became official 2 weeks ago. And I've been lying awake at night wondering if I'm ever going to feel like myself again. And my piano helped? Your piano made me remember that there are still beautiful things in the world. Things worth staying awake for. I felt something shift in my chest, something warm and dangerous and completely unexpected. Daniel, I need to tell you something. Okay. I moved here because I was running away from something too. What were you running away from? A life that didn't fit me anymore. A job I hated, a boyfriend who treated me like an accessory, a version of myself that I didn't recognize. I paused, then decided to tell him everything. His name was Marcus, investment banker in New York. We dated for 2 years, and the entire time I felt like I was auditioning for the role of perfect girlfriend instead of just being myself. What happened? He proposed. At Le Bernardin, with a ring that probably cost more than most people make in a year. And when he got down on one knee, all I could think about was how sterile it all felt. Like a business transaction. Did you say yes? I said I needed time to think about it. Which was apparently the wrong answer, because he told me that any woman who really loved him wouldn't need to think about marrying him. I laughed, but it came out bitter. He wasn't wrong. If I'd really loved him, I would have said yes immediately. Or maybe if he'd really known you, he wouldn't have proposed somewhere that made you feel like you were being interviewed instead of celebrated. The observation hit me like a revelation. That's exactly how it felt. Like an interview. What happened then? I broke up with him 3 days later. Quit my job a week after that. Sold everything I owned and moved down here with nothing but my piano and enough money to survive for 6 months while I figured out who I was without all the expectations. Daniel studied my face with those intense brown eyes. And have you? Figured out who you are? I'm starting to. Turns out I'm someone who takes risks, who says what she means, who plays piano at 3 a.m. because it's the only time I feel completely free. I looked at him directly. Someone who would absolutely get involved with her landlord if he was the right person. And, instead of answering, I reached up and touched his face, feeling the slight roughness of stubble against my palm. Ask me again after you kiss me. Daniel's smile was slow and devastating. Is that an invitation? That's a challenge. He cupped my face in his hands and leaned down slowly, giving me plenty of time to change my mind. When his lips touched mine, it was soft and careful and electric, like he was trying to memorize the taste of me. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard. Well, he asked, his forehead resting against mine. Well, what? Am I the right person? I smiled and pulled him closer. Ask me again after dinner. Is that a yes to dinner? That's a yes to seeing where this goes, even though it's complicated and probably inadvisable and definitely not what I planned when I moved to Miami. What did you plan when you moved to Miami? To reinvent myself. To figure out who I am when I'm not trying to please everyone else. And how's that going? Better than expected. Turns out the real me is someone who opens doors and towels and kisses mysterious strangers in her kitchen. Daniel laughed, and the sound was rich and warm and made me want to hear it every day for the rest of my life. For the record, he said, I prefer it when you're not mysterious. Good, because I'm terrible at keeping secrets anyway. What other secrets are you terrible at keeping? Like the fact that I've been hoping someone interesting would notice me since I moved in here? Mission accomplished. Or the fact that I haven't felt this attracted to someone in, maybe ever? That's good to know. Or the fact that I'm already wondering what it would be like to wake up next to you? Daniel's eyes darkened. Emma. Too much. Not nearly enough. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking, really talking, about everything and nothing. Daniel told me about building his real estate empire from nothing, starting with a single duplex in Little Havana when he was 25 and working construction during the day while renovating properties at night. My ex-wife used to say I loved those buildings more than I loved her, he said, his voice growing quiet. And maybe she was right. I was so focused on building something lasting that I forgot to actually live in the life I was building. Is that why you got divorced? Partly. Also because she decided she wanted to move back to New York and be closer to her family, and I couldn't imagine leaving Miami. This city is in my blood, you know. I'm starting to understand that feeling. What about you? Tell me about the music. I started playing when I was 5. My grandmother taught me on this old upright piano that was probably older than she was. I smiled at the memory. She used to say that music was the closest thing we had to a universal language, that you could tell someone your deepest thoughts without ever saying a word. She sounds wise. She was. She died when I was 16, and I stopped playing for almost 2 years because it hurt too much to sit at a piano without her there to guide me. What made you start again? College. I was miserable my freshman year, homesick and lonely and questioning everything about my life. One night, I found a practice room in the music building and just started playing, and for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Why didn't you major in music? Because my parents were practical people who wanted me to have a stable career. They pushed me toward accounting because it was safe and reliable and would always pay the bills. But it didn't make you happy. It made me miserable. Every day I sat in that office in Manhattan, calculating other people's profits and losses. I felt like I was dying a little bit inside. Daniel reached over and took my hand. And now? Now I play piano at 3 a.m. and answer doors and towels and have conversations with mysterious strangers who turn out to be building owners. I squeezed his hand. Now I feel alive again. Why don't you perform now? He asked as we sat on my couch, my legs curled under me and his arm around my shoulders. Because I'm not good enough. Says who? Says everyone who's ever heard me play. I've heard you play. You're extraordinary. You heard me playing at 3 a.m. through floor-to-ceiling windows. That's not exactly a professional evaluation. Daniel was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. Emma, can I tell you something about the night I first heard you play? Sure. I was standing on my balcony at 3 a.m. because I couldn't sleep, and I was thinking about all the ways my life had turned out differently than I'd planned. I was feeling sorry for myself and wondering if I'd ever feel passionate about anything again. And then I heard this music floating up from somewhere in the building, and it was so beautiful and sad and hopeful all at the same time that I just stood there and listened until you stopped playing. That was only like 10 minutes. It was the best 10 minutes I'd had in months. And I went to bed that night feeling like maybe there were still surprises left in the world. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Daniel, so when you tell me you're not good enough to perform, I have to respectfully disagree. Because your music made me feel something I thought I'd lost the ability to feel. What? Hope. 6 months later, Daniel convinced me to play at a small venue he knew, and the owner offered me a regular gig on the spot. A year after that, I quit my day job to teach piano lessons and perform at small clubs around Miami. People still ask how we met, and Daniel always tells them that I answered the door in a towel and changed his life forever. I tell them that he pretended to be a maintenance worker and taught me that sometimes the best things happen when you stop trying to be someone you're not. Before I go, thank you. These stories are real. They're mine. And I share one every day. If you want to hear more, subscribe. We live together now, in the penthouse he mentioned that first day, and every night I play piano for an audience of one. The man who heard something worth listening to when I was just playing for myself. Sometimes the most beautiful connections happen when you least expect them, when you're just being authentically yourself, even if that self happens to be standing in a doorway wearing nothing but a towel and hoping someone will finally see who you really are.